So I've been asked to give some of my experience in innovation and what happened when we founded companies and the like. And I think I'm going to be slightly controversial about some of the points that you can find in the publications and books about the topic of innovation. So without further ado, let's look at the outline of my talk. So I will first set the stage of what innovation means and what is important about innovation. And then I'll look at the most important part of fostering innovation, which is the university-industry relationship. And then I'll go into the role of research in startups. So I think that this part is often not well represented. And I think that there are a lot of myths around that tell you that you don't have to get a university degree to be good at innovation, and look at Steve Jobs and all that kind of stuff, which in my opinion is very dangerous to support. Then I'll talk about my experience in funding two companies, as I mentioned before, that actually had an incredible success, and then never thought that these companies would have the success they did. And finally, I will give you some consideration about the Singaporean ecosystem and what I think should be done or is lacking from the system as we have here. So, innovation. So what does innovation really mean? It means that you bring some new idea, new products, new services to the market. That's the most commonly accepted version of innovation. Now, the point is that if you look at the economic infrastructure, and if you look at high-tech startups, for example, that is something that we are interested in, you will find out that the number of people that work in this domain is really small compared to the global number of workers in the United States and in the world. But the importance of this small number of people cannot be overemphasized. And in fact, there was a very important research by a colleague, Italian colleague at Berkeley, Moretti, who actually showed that the traction that this thing have on other jobs is really very, very strong in terms of salaries and in terms of economic welfare of the ecosystem. Now, the point is that, as we all know, there is not a single way of innovating. And so when I will tell you about my experience about funding Cadence Synopsys, you will see that there are some non-obvious way in which we innovated. Now, the other big mistake that sometimes is made, especially in academic circles, is that invention equals innovation. It's not so at all. So you can innovate without having an invention, and you can invent something that doesn't have an application whatsoever, at least in the short period, right? So make sure that you don't make that confusion. So now, of course, I come from the Silicon Valley. I have experienced Silicon Valley. Many people ask me, what is Silicon Valley? What is the secret of success in Silicon Valley? Well, the best explanation I found, and so this slide is very old, it's maybe 20 years old, is this, right? So the Silicon Valley is really nothing different than the Amazon, meaning that there are all kinds of life forms, that death is common, that animals live and die all the time, and that if you look at the resiliency of the system, is incredible, it's very strong. And that is what Silicon Valley is all about. How many times have you heard that Silicon Valley is over, is dead, it's not going to continue? I heard this for the last 30 years, and still there, right? And still going rather strong, right? And why? Because of the ecosystem. So what I'm going to stress throughout the talk, and especially looking at Singapore, what is most important in fostering innovation is to have a wealthy ecosystem in terms of research, in terms of companies, large, big, small, government, and so on. Okay. So now, of course, there is also a small help from your friends from university. And in fact, many people say that Berkeley first, of course, and then Stanford. You will be surprised. I was surprised too. You will see a few slides from now. But this is an important factor of the ecosystem, is the fact that you have very strong university. And why is that? Because my motto in startups is always people, people, and people, right? And people, where do you get the people? You get the people from the university, not from Steve Jobs-like people, right? That is 1 in a million. Okay. Now, what are then the factors in success? We said the ecosystem, but also you can think about the infrastructure. So in the infrastructure, you have legal and financial services. We already talked about universities, but also research centers. The role of a research center like Xerox PARC cannot be, again, overemphasized in terms of the evolution of the computing world. Without Xerox PARC, we probably will not have had things like Apple and the like. Now, this is a very important point that I'm going to make, is that you need large companies. And you need the small companies to aspire to become big. And this is what I always scream my lungs out in Europe, because if you go to any European meetings about, how to support the economy in Europe, they will always say small, medium enterprise, which is fine, but is not fine. Which is fine because you have a lot of people employed, but is not fine because they are not trying to become large. They stay 5, 10 people. And so who cares, right, in terms of what the world is going to see 20 years from now? So the point is that you have to instill the ambition to grow large, to become a world leader in what you do. Now, private equity, of course, angels, incubators, seed investors, venture capital, mezzanine investor, and so on and so forth. All of these are animals in the ecosystem. Now, are they fundamental? Well, as fundamental as the other factors. So when people, again, you go to other ecosystems and say, oh, venture capital. We don't have enough venture capital. Okay, you fund venture capital and nothing happens. So why? Because it's not enough. It's not enough. If you have 1 gazillion venture capitalists, you're actually damaging the system more than helping the system to grow. And then, most importantly, the networking is the key point, because from networking, you get new ideas, right? So, for example, the original conception of Create is great because we get to talk. I love to talk. I'm Italian, what the heck. And but I do talk a lot with the German guys, right? TUM, we love each other. We have very interesting program going on. And how did it come about? Because we were living here in Create. And so that yielded some interesting research that we have in mind. So let's talk about university-industry relationship. Now, also here, there is a lot of misconception in various parts. So now, how does this relationship occur? So one is sponsored research agreement. So you get companies to fund your work. Now, what I really like is the first, unrestricted grants. What it means is that companies sign a check and say, do whatever, right? Because we hope that what you do will be useful to us. And of course, being the guy who receives the money, I love it, right? No constraint. But there is a reason why that is so. Because the point is that if you fund a successful professor, if you like, in terms of inventing something new, you don't want to corral his inventions in one way or another. You want him to be free to find something. And always you have in the back of your mind that these guys sign a check for your research. And so you will inform them of what's going on. And that is enough to warrant the agreement. Others is directed research. Now, if you go to Europe, and I see my old friend Kostas Glinos here, who was an important factor in developing new programs in the European community, especially in the embedded system domains. Now, if you look at the directed research, is what people in European university go after. So they go after money, which is a super glorified consulting money, which is not good. I mean, this is bad, actually. So remember that if you get too much direction from industry, you're not going to innovate that much. Some is good, a lot is bad, okay? Now, joint and supported laboratories. This one is a way of corralling a number of companies to support your work. And this is very good because also there is this networking taking place. So in Berkeley, we have a CAD/CAM consortium. It's actually the one that I helped funding many years ago. Industrial Cyber Physical System, the Swarm Lab, the Berkeley Sensor and Actuator Center, and so on. So these are all quite well-known centers, and the number of companies that support these kind of things is very large. And also the companies get the benefit to talking to their peers in Europe, in Japan, and United States. It's a good forum to exchange ideas. Of course, startups goes without saying, and also patents and IP generation is an important factor, albeit in Berkeley, we actually are very fond of open innovation, right? So which means that we put everything in the open domain. And that is a good way of seeding the interest of companies in the research you do, open. So you can try them without having to buy into that particular technology. Now, the important thing is that, and again, we were talking about comparing ecosystems in the title of my talk. If you look at some places in the world, the fact that you work with industry is bad. Industry is the devil, right? So on one side, you want the money from industry, but on the other side, they are bad, right? You don't want to recognize the work that is done in collaboration with industry or in the industrial domain. So thank God in the United States it's different. So if you do that, then you get a good plus in your academic research. Now, the point is that when you start evaluating professors, what they do, many people look at numbers of papers, right? And I call paperitis, right? It's a very bad disease, right? We should have a center here about paperitis. It's very bad, right? And the other one is H-indexitis, right? Which is a follow-on to that. And again, some university system, H-index is the gospel, right? But it doesn't mean much, right? Because now people start cross-quoting themselves. And so the value of H-index is what it is, right? So you have to look at it, but, you know, not that important. Now, other bad disease is patentitis, right? So if you go to any university in the world, they will value the fact that you write patents. Now, it so happens that I've been consulting for several research centers and universities and the like. And then my first question is that, how many patents did you license? Now, they start saying, we have 1,000 patents, just to make a number. And then when my question, sorry, how many of these did you license? If it is 5, it's already a lot, right? And so why do you make 1,000 patents? Nobody's going to use it. So what is the point, right? And this is what people tend to do when they don't understand the value of having a patent or having a protection of your intellectual property. Okay, now, I think that the best way to picture successful cooperation with industry is visiting professional and industrial leaves. I myself went for 1 year in 1980 at IBM and 1981 at Harris Semiconductors, and these were the roots of the work that led to the foundation of the companies that we're going to see later on in my talk. So that is unbelievably good because you get exposed to how the companies work and the company get exposed on your research. And so, in fact, I call it viral infection, so that's a virus, right? So this is good viral infection. Paperitis, H-indexitis, patentitis, bad. Interaction, good, right? So that's the... Oh, last disease is startupitis, right? So now you will see that in Europe there are tons of startups, right? You go to any countries and you find, we have 10,000 startups. And then the first question is, okay, how much money do they make? And we'll see that the average is 30K per year. I mean, what the heck do you have a company that makes $30,000 a year? You know, what is the point of investing time and money in this kind of environments? Okay, so role of research in startups. So as I said before, there is a myth in Silicon Valley, or everywhere in the world, actually in Silicon Valley less so, is the fact that actually it's good if you don't go to university or to school, And there's always Steve Jobs pops up, right? And then they say, look, Bill Gates didn't graduate from Harvard. Oh, well, he still has the record for a second fastest sorting algorithm in the world. So he's not exactly your dropout, right? He found out something that was very good. So he said, all right, I don't need to get a degree because I know enough already. That's a different kind of view. All right, so now there is a survey from Kaufman Foundation that of 549 company founders, I was there too, you will find that the average and median age of company founders was 40. This is another myth. In general, they say young people do the startups. Yes and no. You need some seasoned guy there because otherwise you don't know how to manage the startup. So beware that the average is actually 40. And 95.1% of respondents, they had a bachelor degree, and 47% had advanced degree. So that much for don't get a degree is not useful. All right. Now, if we look at what drives venture returns, so what is that we do? By the way, I also, in my spare time, do work in venture capital. So I am in investment committee of 3 companies, 3 different venture capital funds. And the point is that you look at market growth. What matters the most in terms of venture is to see the derivative. It's not the absolute value, it's the derivative that matters. Efficiency of capital deployment. You invest 1, you get 100. Irrational exuberance in exit markets. Now, there is one case in point, which is autonomous driving. That is a classical example of over-exuberance. Now, if you just say, by the way, I work in autonomous driving, here is a check for 100 million, and if you really have something to show, it's 500 million. And if I really believe that you're strategic to me, it's 1 billion. These are the numbers, right? Now, look at Ford. Ford has invested in a company called Argos AI. They have nothing. They spend 1 billion to be owner of a piece of a company. I mean, this is crazy, in my view, right? Now, of course, Newtonomy here was a very good example of, and they have a nice approach to autonomous driving, 450 million, bought by Delphi. I mean, that's kind of strange, right? But that's this important point, irrational exuberance in exit market, and a handful of big winners. So if someone has done very well in a sector, then venture capital tend to like that sector and invest in it. But most of all, is fundamental innovation. So the tech world is actually not flat, right? We always say the world is flat, doesn't matter where you are, what to do. Not true. Okay, look at this. Now, this one is the H index of patents, right? It is one interesting aspect of where the key innovation come from. You see, this one is San Francisco and Silicon Valley. You see the peak? Now, look at the East Coast, is the other peak, but it's 1/3, about 1/3 of the height. If you look at all these peaks, they are always corresponding to at least one good university. So which shows again that the presence of good university is key for the innovation ecosystem. Now, if you look at the investment, this Q3 2017, so it's just yesterday, right? And if you look at the amount of money, this is about 3 times as much as in the East Coast, which is exactly the same ratio that we saw before. So the tech world is not flat. Now, let's look at, I told you that was kind of surprising. So PitchBook University report came out, and they do an analysis of all the startups and who has funded them and all that kind of nice stuff. Guess what? I was totally surprised, believe me, even though I come from Berkeley. This is a very surprising statistics that shows that actually Berkeley has more startups than Stanford, MIT, and Harvard. Okay, more than Stanford. This is really surprising, but that's what it is. Now, we move over, and this one is less pleasing for who is the kind. But still, it's not bad. The Stanford collected 57 billion, and we only 15 billion, but okay, right? That goes to say that Stanford are smarter than we are when it comes to caching, right? So to drive ideas, we are okay. But caching is a different story. Okay. Now, the science application dilemma. We said before about the relationship between research, innovation, what universities stand for, what people look at doing, and so on. And I believe that the science application dilemma is very, very real. So you got, this one is Raffaello Sanzio, the School of Athens. And you know about Aristotle that was very much involved in nature and you know, how you study physical phenomena. And then you got Plato, that is actually all about abstractions. And so the point is, how do you kind of combine the two? Is it possible to combine the two? Well, my own history is that actually it is possible, and we'll see how that goes. By the way, research in industries, last consideration. We just said that Berkeley had the largest number of startups and so on and so forth. But the main goal of a university is research and teaching. And so much so that Berkeley, we have, I mean, if we count generously, is 94 Nobel laureates have some connection to University of California. And yet we have the largest number of startups. So you see, there is a correlation there somehow. And of course, this one is a very interesting thing. When I came to Berkeley in 1975, actually was my first year there, and I was walking by and I saw this signs. NL, I said, what are these? Why can't I park there? And then someone told me this stands for Nobel laureates. And so, you know, at Berkeley, any Nobel laureates in the audience, at Berkeley, we have reserved parking, okay? So this is good benefit. Okay. So I think that the best way to explain how research plays in innovation and the like is something that David Stokes many years ago presented, and is the famous Pasteur quadrant. And the world is divided up into 4 quadrants, and the axes are quest for fundamental understanding, pure research, and that is consideration of use, right? So do we think about what we can do with what we invent, right? So of course this is the best quadrant, and we don't put any name, will be too crowded, right? Many people here. Too crowded. Okay. But we have some very good guy that didn't care at all about application, so Niels Bohr. And we had some so-so guy, who actually did invent things without understanding why they were inventing it, you know. That's not exactly my model. I don't know if you realize that. But then this is very interesting, is that you do fundamental research, but you have in the back of your mind, what the heck am I going to do with what I find? And if I find it, is it going to change the world or not? So impact, the question of impact. And so if I look at all my colleagues that I admire, is always that. What does my research impact? What is the impact of what I do? Impact doesn't mean, you know, creating billions of dollars company. It means what I have changed in the understanding of the world or in the economic infrastructure. Okay. Now, funding successful company. Now it's about me, okay? There you go. So once upon a time. So I graduated in 1971. My years are 1966 to 1971, all right? So what was the situation? We had 3,500 transistors on a chip. This one was a way of verifying chips. This is the way we were preparing the mask, all by hands, sitting down at the table and cutting the ruby leaf. Many of you are so young that don't even know what a ruby leaf is, but that's the way we did things. And guess what? This was a memory that went into computers, you know, the magnetic rings with wires, and they were assembled by hand. And then we were writing programs with punch cards. It was not like in the prehistoric times, you know, it's only a few years ago, but yet, you know, that's what we had. Now, fast forward, right? So I graduated, went to Berkeley. What did I find? Punch card again, right? And so, in fact, with Richard Newton, a dear friend of mine, unfortunately passed away. He's a great person. So we were going and bringing our Spice deck to the computer center like this. Then I tripped, right? You know, yes, oh no, right? Everything. I think that our friendship was seriously tested then, seriously tested. You don't want to know how much time it took us to bring back the program. Anyway, so fast forward, 1983. So this was the Intel 386, 275,000 transistors. Now, the guy that you see over there is me, a younger version of me in 1983. And these two guys were, this Pat Gelsinger was number 2 at Intel for a long time, and he was the chief architect of the 386. And this guy was David Hill, and was the project manager of the 386. So once I get these guys knocking at my door, together with Albert Yu, who was the head of all the microprocessor units at Intel, and they say, well, we understand you do something funny with your mathematics, and we think that we have a serious problem, meaning that we have to come up with this guy, the 386, in 3 years, and we have no clue how to go about it, because it's a really substantial change in architecture, number of transistors, all of that. So can you help us? So yes, we got together, and you see the interaction between research and industry. So they presented the problem, and they say, we don't know how to do it. And then they say, let's try. So there was research, basic research about algorithms. Then they hired me as a consultant, and they funded the research that we're doing at Berkeley, and they shipped 3 people of the designers of the 386 to stay 100% of their time in Berkeley. Okay, see this change? Now that yielded even better algorithms, because I realized that something that I was assuming was actually not true. And these other assumptions made the mathematics much more interesting. So it's not necessarily true that if you look at application, you don't do better research. It's actually the opposite. Okay, so now what the key, how to say, informing principle of my research was about to look at what people used to do. It was design practice, so very robust, as you can see. And what I tried to instill was what I call design science. And so this was the birth of engineering design automation idea, which was based about principle, not techniques. Techniques are short-lived, principles are long-lived. And so still now, the companies are alive and well, and what we did in terms of algorithm is still all there. Why? Because we're funded on rigorous approaches. And so it's much more solid than if you do just seat of the pants kind of things. Now, how likely is that a startup has success? Very unlikely. It's about 1 in 10 as what you would call success. Now, this doesn't mean that it's a unicorn, it's $1 billion company. It has success. So the range 100 million kind of company. So it's 10x of your investment. The likelihood that you have a unicorn is about 1 in 1,000, right? Guess what happened? Cadence and Synopsys. So we founded Cadence in 1983. It was based on open databases, open, so everybody could use it without paying for it. A Unix workstation, and remember 1983, we still had almost the punch card. It was just at the beginning of the screens, right, and the terminals. So Unix workstation was a big kind of idea, and nothing to do with the algorithms. We said maybe that in the future designers will have their own personal workstation. Okay, this is very important insight that had nothing to do with science. It just say we intercept the future. This is where the world is going to go. So our techniques have to be adapted to that world. And remember, was the Sun was just funded, right? So it's not a common view. Automatic layout, meaning we wanted to do things automatically without the use of extensive use of people. Now, we talk about innovation, right? There are many ways of innovating. One already told you, Unix workstation, nothing to do with the algorithm of the industry or the university job. But also new funding model. Now, the standard funding model has always been venture capital in that time. It was nothing else. But the point is that many companies that funded my research at Berkeley said, we need something for supporting what you do, because we cannot just base on university tools. So get busy and fund the company. So I said, okay, give us the money. So they did. So what happened is that we had 1/5 of the funding was from venture capital, but 4/5 was by National, Harris, General Electric, and Ericsson. So large companies, the users, they were so interested that they paid for it by acquiring capital in the company. So this is a novelty. So there's innovation there too. Now the interesting point is that, oh gee, great, it's always being up and going. No, it's actually almost died, right? 3 years after we finished the money and we didn't get much in terms of selling things. Other innovations, so if you don't continue hitting your head against the wall, if it doesn't work, try something else. And so we changed business models, so we sold partnerships. So let's get together with industry. So that we knew how to do very well from university point of view, so let's get going. So we were supposed to go public, and it went well. So we had enough money to figure that we could go in IPO. And so we started the process, and guess what happened? Is that the day in which we were supposed to go IPO was Black Monday, which was a single day where the stock went down the most, right? And so we had to withdraw the IPO, but we are ready to go. So what did we do? We identify a company, actually was supposed to start with us at the same company. They went public a week before, right? So they were public. So we acquired that company, we became public. Hallelujah, right? So innovation, right? If something doesn't work because the stock market decided to go in different direction, well, you find another solution, right? That's what innovation is all about. So my role, what did I do there? I wrote the business plan with Richard Newton. I developed a partnership model. That was my idea. And I was chief consultant, chair of advisory board up to 1991. And then after that, I became the chief technology advisor, sort of CTO, but I didn't want to leave the university, and member of the board. Okay, up to now. All right. So synopsis, how did it go? So, well, it so happened that some other research that I was doing caught the attention of some of the companies and so on. And then I went to Cadence and I said, look, I have 2 graduate students who are getting their PhD. This stuff's really hot, so why don't you pick it up? And then the then CEO said, well, look, this one is too mathematical. Okay, so when we, no. Okay, say, can I start another company? And they say, sure, go ahead. Synopsis, all right. Based on automatic synthesis, so that was logic design. So with Cadence, we eliminated the manual design of a layout, and with Synopsis, we eliminated the logic design completely by doing algorithms. Same funding model as Cadence. Something works, don't invent something else. If it doesn't work, invent something else, but if it does work, don't fix it if it ain't broken, right? So just follow. All right, so this went really well because second time I knew what we should not have done, so we did it right. And so went public in 1991. My role there, I helped with the business plan and finding the investors, especially Harris, develop the partnership model, which is, by the way, the same as Cadence, so don't reinvent if you already did. I was named chief consultant. I was the chair of the advisory board up to 1991. 1991, major problem arise because the 2 companies start competing with each other, big time. So I had to choose, right? And so you know how I chose? You know the concept, flip the coin? That's this principle, right? So flip the coin. When you don't know, flip the coin. Okay. So what was the key role? This one is the Moore's law, and actually the formation of Cadence and Synopsis around here is what actually made possible to go to 2 billion transistors on a chip when we started with 3,000 transistors on a chip. So impact, right? That's not bad, right? I can be happy about that. So this one is, I took it down yesterday, actually 2 days ago, and this one is the Cadence, and you see market cap is 12.78 billion, right? Not bad from industrial point of view. And it keeps on going, right? Okay. Now, if you look at Synopsis, okay, Now, Synopsys, the market cap is 13.49 billion, right? So probably I chose the wrong company, but okay, cannot complain. Not too much difference, all right. So that's the story of the two companies. So you see how you go about it, in the sense that there is a major factor in being successful, and that is called luck, L-U-C-K, and to the square power, okay? Luck. Look at the Black Monday situation and all that. It's luck. I mean, don't underestimate. So the first question I asked to the guy who's proposing to my venture capital fund is that, how lucky are you? And if you say, I'm the most horrible guy, say, sorry, next. Because this is something that we really have to keep in the back of our mind. It's luck, right? Okay. So final words of wisdom. So this one are two Italian painters. This one is 1500, and this guy is De Chirico in 1900. So I love art, as you can see. Okay, so what is the final word of wisdom? It's about Singapore, right? So I've been to Singapore, as was pointed out by the introduction this morning, since the 90s, right? I mean, early 90s. So it's been, early 80s, I should say. So it's about 30 years that I know this place. So what are the plus that I see in this place? So strategic thinking, no question about it. So the top of the country thinks strategically. Resources, I mean, look at Create, that's interesting. Living laboratory, so people are willing to take chances and to put down new technology in the infrastructure. Attention to research, a lot of money in Singapore goes to research, maybe sometimes too much. Now, I know that I'm going to be killed after I finish my... But, the point is that you want to fund good research, not research for the sake of research, right? Good research. Don't talk to me about applied research and basic research. There is only two kinds, good and bad. So, and good, it can be basic as well as applied, and bad can be basic as well as applied. So good and bad. So you have to be very rigorous about choosing project. Attention to research, we said, and good university system, nothing to sneeze about. NUS and NTU are certainly, and the other ones as well, but these two are stand out. Minus, lack of full ecosystem of innovation, for innovation. So I think there are parts of the ecosystem that are missing, among which, for example, a solid stock market, right? That's an important one because it's an exit strategy. Large enterprises based in Singapore who are interested in high technology. Risk-averse culture. Failure is a serious problem. So, I mean, this is a generic problem of Asia, right? People don't want to fail. But not only Asia, I mean, Europe is similar. So people don't want to fail. Fail is a bad thing. You get a black eye. Now, again, in the United States, everybody says, you must fail. This is stupid. Nobody wants to fail, right? It's so stupid. I mean, I want to kill someone when they say that. The point is that there is a good way of failing and a bad way of failing. Bad way of failing, if you're totally stupid, you take horrible risk and all of that. The good failure is when you learn from your mistakes. And there are things that you don't know or you don't understand. And then after you fail, you say, aha, now I know what not to do. All right, so that's a good way of failing. Now, bureaucracy. Sorry to say, but this is pretty slow-moving system. Remember what I said, speed, not patents, was a key in innovation. So speed, right? And I do understand, we had a long discussion with the people at the top in Singapore, and they said, explain why bureaucracy is important, why regulations are important to avoid corruption, all of that. But up to a point, come on, right? So if you, for example, I came to Create, right? My office had a problem with the shades, right? So I said, well, I would like to have it fixed, right? And we are in energy conservation, so shades up, no good. Sun, heat, right? Okay, we put in place the process. Guess when it got fixed? 6 months later. I mean, that is not what I call a responsive system, right? So if you want to have startups in this kind of environment, then you have problems. Now, since I know how to do startups, I talk to a lot, free startups in the Singaporean system, and they all unanimously say it is a problem for us to hire. Because how many Singaporeans have you got? You know, not many, right? So you have to count on people who come from other places, right? But then you have to make sure that you get the paperwork done. And that's not exactly easy. And so you lose a lot of months trying to resolve that problem. Lack of motivation in young people. I think that the best people here don't go to startups or to industry. They go to government because it's attractive, because people are good. You know, it's a standard thing, right? And same thing you can say about France, right? The bureaucratic system, the government system is excellent. And so many of the best go there. And so that has to be considered as well. And as a consequence of this is, I believe, that the lack of role models in industry. So can you point to a very successful entrepreneur in the Singaporean system? I don't. Can you point to some very good government person? Yes, I can, right? And so that's a big thing. So, and the other thing is that this belief that you can teach people innovation. You can teach people the history of innovation. You cannot teach innovation because it's it's a contradiction in terms. How can you teach someone something new? So here you go. What you have to do, you have to experience it, breathe it, live it. And so the best way to learn how to be innovative is to be in a place where innovation is strong and where you see how people move and what the network means and what motivates people and so on. All right. So role models, we have a bunch, right? So if I talk to my students, and especially notice that people who come to Berkeley from abroad, they all know these guys, and they all want to be like them. They will not, of course, but not all of them, but maybe one or two will be like that. And this is a very strong motivation. You have somebody that has done it, right? Yes, we can, right? So that is a very important point of the innovation culture. So as I said before, beware of over-startupping things, right? So for example, even today we heard, oh, gee, Create is great. We have 35 startups. Okay. But what do they do? How successful are they besides new autonomy? So what's going on? Right? The number don't tell me a thing. Of course, if you say I have 0 startup, so up to a point, right? So that, but situation in Italy. This one is a paper just came out a month ago. So there are 8,000 enterprises listed as innovative startups. Fewer than 300 of these startups have revenues more than 500,000 euros, and the median is about 30,000 euros. So what this means is that are really self-employment enterprises, and so they don't help the ecosystem. So that's what is very common in Europe. Remember what I said at the very beginning, and I don't want to be something that is common in Singapore. So in conclusion, the relationship between industry and research is a key factor in innovation. So research in new domains. So when we started doing the research in EDA, there was nothing in the world that was doing that. So we invented a new sector of the industry, for example. VC is essential to fuel innovation, but not because of the money. It's because of what they can do for you. So mentors, instigators, a bridge to success. They teach you things. They help you grow. Then, of course, VC needs exit. So you have to have a way in which you can sell your company. VC, of course, assess based on risk and potential. So make sure that you understand what is the risk and potential of a company. And in order to be thinking about doing your own company, you have to have a defensible technology and a defensible market, favorable ecosystem, favorable business and financial climate. So if people don't have the money, it's not much that you can do there. And don't forget proven track record and reputation. So the first time when we did Cadence was fairly easy to do. When we did Synopsys was slam dunk, so easy. I mean, embarrassingly easy. Why? Because we have done it before, right? VC are not funding good ideas, nor they support research. Sometimes you hear young people say, oh, we don't get VC to fund our research. What? I mean, they don't fund research. They fund things that make money. There are various sources of funding. Don't think that VC is the only one. But you have to select the right funding model for what you do. And then finally, Singapore can be a great place for innovation. Is there yet? No, I don't think. But you are on a good path to that. Thank you very much for your attention.